Hello, everyone. I am Solomon Lederer, co-founder of Blockmatics, and we are back to have a discussion today with Yves Larose, who is the founder of EOS Nation. So many of you are used to us talking about Ethereum and its related technologies, but we are really an blockchain agnostic education group. So we definitely always want to give you a little bit about the other blockchains as well. So, which we've covered in the past. We've done Tezos and some of the others. And we actually do have a little bit of a EOS instructional on our website as well. But we're going to get into it and kind of talk about what differentiates EOS from the other blockchains, and also what it means to be a block producer, and what EOS Nation is doing in the EOS space. So, well, welcome, Yves. And first off, I guess it would be good to start because, as I was saying, a lot of people are coming from probably the Ethereum world. It kind of is helpful to sort of discuss what attracted you to EOS and which world did you come from?
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on, Solomon. This is really nice. I really enjoy being able to speak to others who are not as intimate with EOS as I am, seeing as I spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in this world. I think it's really good to be able to speak to others who are in the blockchain space, might not know much about EOS, or starting to explore EOS, and are open to having information on different kinds of projects. And I think you hit it on the head when you said you're blockchain agnostic. Even though I am a block producer on EOS, I'll say that I'm also blockchain agnostic in the sense that I think that there's going to be multiple blockchain projects that are going to be thriving in this whole ecosystem, each catering to particular needs. I myself started in the blockchain space in 2010. I started mining Bitcoin, I believe it was February, maybe early February 2010. I was worth peanuts at the time, and I simply liked the idea of being able to participate in a decentralized, ecosystem where you could potentially, create value without having a central authority. And I like the idea of immutability. I like the idea of the decentralized portion of it. And I like kind of where we were heading with that as well. Having just come out of the 2008 crash and everything that happened with that, that movement itself really attracted me. I was living in Japan at the time, and I was hearing everything from overseas kind of deal. I wasn't living it myself because I was overseas, but just that whole thing really attracted me to it. And growing up with computers, I had that in the background as well. And just kind of one thing led to the next. And over the first couple of years, I was an okay miner in Bitcoin until I recall exactly when I stopped being a miner. It was when the ASICs miners were coming out. So I knew a couple of people that had ordered them. They were on back order for the longest time. Nobody was receiving them. We weren't sure if this was an actual thing or not. So at the time, we we're still mining with our personal computers, still, GPUs, Radeon guys. So I've got SLIs basically on my ceiling, and they're all connected with one another so that they can vent out better, etc. And at some point, I kind of saw where we would just need more and more computing power to do this, which is the whole premise behind SHA 256 and securing that in a proof of work environment. And with the ASICs miners, I saw that the power would become centralized in large mining farms. So I kind of took a distance, and I really got interested in the blockchain space again when Ethereum came out. And it was this whole idea of creating a platform where you could potentially build on it. And so, first use case of the blockchain, you've got these payment systems that are built. But at some point, if you really want the blockchain technology to expand and become mainstream, it needs to be usable for the average person. And I like to say that we're still not there yet. My grandpa, who's 93 years old, I tried to explain to him, let alone what the internet is and how that works, but he sees me use my phone, etc. But blockchain space, at some point, it's going to be the underlying in my opinion, technology that secures the infrastructure of the internet.
Did you feel? I mean, maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but did you feel that Ethereum, in a sense, has some disadvantages in being kind of user friendly for the general public? That say EOS has advantages over that. So I guess what were some things that maybe, so with respect to Bitcoin, you were saying, I guess the things that kind of made you, I guess, step back a little bit was the fact that the mining became harder to do and more centralized. And then also the fact that it's not really a platform for, the smart contracts. So you don't have the ability to actually create apps on Bitcoin, at least not easily. But then, so that moved you from Bitcoin to Ethereum. And what sort of moved you from Ethereum to EOS?
The idea that you now have a platform, but you can't actually build on it. So you can leverage the platform to, and we saw in the summer of 2017, ICOs. So you can deploy the smart contract on Ethereum. But if you actually want to run whatever it is you're building on the blockchain itself, you can't. Ethereum is limited in transactions per second. The gas fees are prohibitive for the vast majority of the population on the planet. The unbanked cannot afford to make transactions on Ethereum. And if you realistically want to build an application on Ethereum itself, the delay as well, so the block time, even though we switched from 10 minutes, which was incredible with Bitcoin, to 2.5 minutes, it's still not fast enough. If I want to build a Facebook,
seconds, I guess. Yeah.
Depending on where you stand in the order of the block, sure. But with if I'm on Facebook, and I want to like, I can't wait 30 seconds or 2 minutes for that like to appear. So if EOS really brought me in because of that. So from the technological point of view,
the 1 second block times, and then
500 milliseconds, sub-second block
times. And then you're saying the fees are a lot less. So what is
the fees are free,
like the fee structure, or when do you pay fees in EOS?
So I think it's 500 millisecond blocks, which means that you've got arguably instantaneous transactions, regardless of where you find yourself.
Right. Are there any other public blockchains that are as fast or even faster than that?
More so centralized
maybe
ones.
Maybe you're going to jump from EOS to the next one.
Yeah, no, but more so centralized ones, sure. The scale of EOS with the liquidity of EOS being a platform, no.
Right. It probably is, I guess we can say, the fastest public, decentralized blockchain. Yeah. Well, we're going to get into that decentralized question.
Block time is really great. And then transaction fees, right? So you mentioned transaction fees. On EOS, there are no transaction fees. The cost to the end user gets passed down very differently than a traditional proof of work system. So the protocol for EOS is delegated proof of stake, where the block producers that are put into, I guess, the block production rankings or spots do get paid, but they don't get paid nearly as much. And the cost to run a block producer is not nearly as much, let's say, as on a traditional proof of work protocol where you need a mining farm. So I do have a data center, I do have a lot of computers, but we're not talking about hundreds of $1 million worth if I'm comparing myself, let's say, to the largest mining farms in Bitcoin or Ethereum. So the costs are much lower, which means that the end user doesn't have the costs.
So what does a block producer, so maybe we need to take a step back. So number one, block producers, I guess you can say they are the analog to miners that you would have in Bitcoin or Ethereum. So obviously it's not a proof of work blockchain, it's proof of stake.
Delegated proof of stake.
Delegated proof of stake.
Which is also kind of a variation of.
Right, that is a big difference for sure. So in EOS, you have just 21 of these block producers that are sort of voted in or sort of assigned to be the block producers at any time. So yeah, first we'll step through it first in terms of how you become a block producer, and then I do want to lead up to that question in terms of what block producers are then earning. So
Sure.
yeah, so you've been a block producer, and I know there is a bit of a kind of competition to sort of be voted in to be one of those 21. So how does that process work?
So the elections in EOS are ongoing. Effectively, there's a snapshot taken of staked EOS into block producers every 60 seconds. And so it's an ongoing election. And as an end user, you have a certain amount of stake. So it's all predicated on the skin in the game model for delegated proof of stake. You've got a certain amount of EOS,
the
more voices you have. Yeah. And so if you have 10,000 EOS, you effectively have 10,000 voices or 10,000 votes.
Yeah.
And you can vote for up to 30 block producers. So right now, if you had 10,000 EOS, you could just put all your 10,000 in EOS Nation. Or you like 3 or 4 block producers and you think they create value, you can vote for those 3 and they will each get 10,000 votes. So your vote is not diluted. It dilutes in the sense that if you vote for 30, you're introducing more votes in the ecosystem. And so you're effectively, the amount of votes that are present in the ecosystem grows. So each block producer is getting a smaller share of that in the sense. Right. So if you've got, let's say 1 million EOS and you only vote for 1, that block producer is getting more power in a way. It's only getting 1 million votes, but because nobody else is getting that 1 million votes, it's effectively a little bit more centralized in that block producer.
Yeah.
So you as an end user decide who you believe brings value in the ecosystem. And those people that bring value are block producers and they compete for your vote. So it's an ongoing competition. So EOS Nation creates tools, participates in meetups, does talk shows like this, travels around, introduces applications in the ecosystem, and basically brings value in a variety of ways. Each block producer does this. And they essentially campaign to get your confidence. Block producers are in the business of selling trust. So in EOS, in delegated proof of stake, the stakeholders that are securing the network are doing so because users who hold the EOS trust in them and put them into position.
Right.
Which is why you don't need large computing power. You're not securing the system through computing power. You're securing the system by saying, I think Solomon is good. Right. I want him and I trust him. Therefore, I'm voting for him.
Right.
And because there's so many EOS in the ecosystem, right now, the threshold to be a formal block producer, so the 21 that you're talking about, actually producing blocks, is a little over 100 million votes.
Okay.
And so we sit right now in 30th position with 97 million votes. So that means that there's 97 million worth of EOS from token holders that say, EOS Nation, we believe you bring enough value in the ecosystem. We want you to be representing our values. We want you to, to represent, to defend our interests type of thing. Right.
Gotcha. So that's a really important point because, out there in general, there's like the biggest criticism of EOS is people saying, well, it's centralized. You only have 21 block producers. But the reality is that those block producers are constantly kind of
always
slotted in and out. And so really you have a slew of even hundreds of other sort of, I guess, what would you call them if you're in the running? Are you just a node?
So there's 21 that are producing blocks at any given time.
Right.
Outside of the 21, if you're able to meet the 0.5% voter threshold,
okay.
So if you are able to gather 0.5% or more of all votes in existence, of all tokens active in existence, you then get put into what we call standby block production. So right now, standby block producers, there's 65.
Gotcha.
And then outside of that, there's about another 450 or so that are trying to even attain that position. So it's a constant competition for people to try and showcase that they're more valuable to the ecosystem, attracting votes from users. So to say that there's only 21 is actually is erroneous. There's 550, I think, right now that have called reg producer. So you would liken that to mining pools. There's 550 mining pools. There's only 21 of them that are producing the blocks. If we look at Ethereum or Bitcoin, there's 3 or 4 mining pools that effectively kind of
that's
control the
a good
ecosystem.
analogy, right? A good comparison right there.
So in EOS, there's 21.
How much? So you were saying you need 0.5% of the votes. How many? Do you know roughly like how many tokens?
33 million right now.
33 million, and then in dollar terms, in EOS is about $6 or so. So
let's say 7. So like $200 million worth.
Okay.
So you need minimum just to be the lowest ranked standby block producer, at least $200 million US dollars worth of backing in it.
Okay.
To be top 21, we're looking at maybe let's say $700 million worth of people backing you.
Gotcha. All right. It's pretty, so it's not like, it's not the easiest thing to be in the running, but nevertheless, you do have hundreds of pools doing it.
And the key to this is that you can remove your vote at any time. So the election, the snapshot's taken every 60 seconds. But right now, instantaneously, if you weren't voting for EOS Nation, you wanted to, you would go instantly and do it. There's no delay.
Gotcha.
And so those rankings change continuously.
Is there a graph that would show, do you know offhand if there's like kind of a graph that shows like kind of how the block producers are moving? Oh, of course. Okay.
Yeah. So I can actually, maybe I'll link that for you.
Yeah. If you can
share with
that would be great. And then, just so people offline can actually take a look at it. So, okay, now getting to that question in terms of you're now in the 21 million. We were saying the fees are a lot less, but what actually are those block producers earning? I mean, I understand, and maybe you can talk about, talk a little bit about EOS Nation as well in terms of is your, the projects you work on, is it primarily to become a block producer, or you're earning, some return on some of the other projects you work on? But that's really a two-part question. So let's tackle first, like what do you earn as a block producer? Sure.
So in EOS, the project itself launched almost a year ago now. The anniversary is in a week and a half. When EOS launched,
there's a June event, right?
Exactly, June 1st in Washington, Block 1. And so EOS launched with 1 billion tokens. And there is inflation in the system. And that inflation, there's 1% going to block producers. So in proof of work, the miners get paid by securing the network and creating those blocks. And we look at inflation in Bitcoin, I think is 4.something%. In Ethereum is very similar as well. In EOS, it's 1%. Of that, so it's a much lower fee, which means that the end user really doesn't, like I said, there's no transaction fees. The block producers get that 1%. That 1% is split up. So of that 1%, 75% of that goes towards the vote rewards. So how many votes are you able to gather? Your pay is dependent on how many votes you have. So again, like I said, the 0.5% threshold, so roughly 33 million EOS right now, if you're able to gather that gives you 100 EOS per day. If you're able to sustain the 33 million votes for a full 24 hours, that's 100 EOS. If you're not able to make the minimum threshold of 100 EOS in a 24-hour period, then you don't get paid.
Okay, so even you yourself now, let's say EOS Nation, even by being in 30th place, you're still getting a share of that 75%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So our share in 30th position right now with 97 million votes approximately is roughly 300 EOS per day, give or take. Now, of that 1%, 75% goes to vote rewards, directly linked to how many votes you have. And the other 25% goes to block production. So if you're slated in that in the 21, you get a certain amount for each round that you produce. So blocks are produced every 500 milliseconds. Block producers are slated, one round is 6 seconds. You're effectively producing 12 blocks.
Right.
12 blocks, next block producer, 12 blocks. So if you get paid for how many blocks you produced. If you're able to be in the 21 for a sustained period of 24 hours, it comes out to about 320 EOS per day. So that's the
I
bonus.
see.
So the difference between, let's say, 22nd position and 21st position
It's like 20 EOS a day.
is about 80% bonus right now. Almost, actually, it's like 100% almost bonus in pay. So even though you're not producing blocks, you're still getting paid. You're still on the side. You're still trying to compete. You still have a budget. You're still adding value, and you're trying to go in the top 21.
Right.
And you're competing against them. And so you're actually doing everything you can to be put into that position. That ongoing competition ensures that block producers continuously add value to the network. If they're in the 21 and for some reason they slack off, they start coasting, they will slowly go down in rankings.
Right.
And we've seen that of the 21 from launch, I believe there's only 3 or 4 that have been in the 21 this whole period of time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people move continuously in and out.
Okay, that's really an amazing statistic and a really strong argument to show that as EOS is being very decentralized, the fact that you're saying that of those 21, there have only been like a few, 3 of them that have actually been able to maintain their position the whole, this whole year. Okay, so yeah, that's really amazing. Now, are there some other, I guess, are there some other features of, well, let's talk about this first. Like, what is sort of Block One's role in EOS? Because people would say, oh, well, that is kind of decentralization. That's the company that's running this all. But what have they done and what do they do?
That's a really good question, Solomon.
Okay.
So because I think that there's a misunderstanding that EOS is centralized when it's really not. And if you're in the space, you understand how decentralized it is because it's difficult to actually get things done because it is decentralized. If it were centralized, it'd be really easy. You just have one point person just go to that location and just get stuff done. So Block One is led by Dan Larimer and as the CTO and Brendan Bloomer as the CEO. They created software. The software is open source, and that's EOS.io. So they're the maintainers right now and the creators of the software that the community and the token holders took to create what we see now as the EOS mainnet and to maintain what we see as the EOS mainnet and to run what we see as the EOS mainnet. Block One itself does not run the chain. Block One's not a block producer. Block One has tokens, but it does not vote. Block One is effectively on the side, and they control no portion of EOS. However, they obviously have a large voice. When Dan Larimer says something, people listen. So we see that relationship is one where they still have weight in the sense that they're still the creator of the software. When they push out updates, we obviously look at the updates, determine whether or not those updates to the software itself are worthwhile implementing. Do we make some changes? And we do. They're there, for example, when there's a security vulnerability, and there have been where, it's code, right? So their code always needs to be updated. Performance upgrades, they push those out, adding multi-threaded features to the software itself. So they're there as the software maintainers, which the block producers also do. But if you're looking at, and this is, we talked about this earlier.
Wait, say that last part. You're saying which the block producers also do. Are you saying that in terms of you do have a lot of weight in being able to, say, create a pull request or contribute to the code? Okay.
Yeah, of course. So I'll give you a concrete example. So EOS is capable of maintaining right now roughly 4,000 transactions per second. In each transaction, you've got actions. And so we see that if you look at Blocktivity, EOS is by far doing the most actions per second out of anything. But that 4,000 transactions per second is quite a bit compared to, let's say, Ethereum 3 or 4. Ethereum is about 18, Bitcoin's about 3 or 4.
Yeah.
With that, and how EOS works is by managing resources. And so with every EOS that you own a share of CPU and net. Net being bandwidth, and CPU being the actual computing executive times to do actions on the network. Last November, December, we saw that there were a lot of gambling applications coming online and people were rolling dice. Very simple, you roll dice. Well, if you, Solomon, wanted to roll 700 dice in the next 2 hours, that actually takes network resources. The more people were doing this, we saw that that's when we were edging the 4,000 transactions per second. When we were at those at that peak, the block producers noticed that there were ways of optimizing CPU balance load and executive times to be able to effectively let you as an end user roll more dice or perform more actions for the same amount of EOS that you held. Mm-hmm. And so we modified parameters in the software to optimize, to make it so that the end user experience was better. And we did multiple occasions. Whenever we see that there's a particular need or there's something that could be improved, we improve it. So the block producers are capable of doing this. And this is also, an important feature of EOS is the 21 that I was talking about earlier. To push any change on chain requires a signature of 15 out of those 21. So we call that a supermajority. So whenever we want to implement a change or whenever we want to do something of significance that will actually change the code, you need 15 out of 21.
Right.
The key difference with EOS is when you do that, you're not forking. So we call that a soft fork. The software upgrades itself, but the token itself does not split in two.
Gotcha.
So if, let's say you were Visa or you were Facebook and you wanted to implement on a platform, on EOS, and at some point in the future, EOS is not as performant as what it needs to be, and there's ways to do that through code, 15 out of 21 would be able to implement those changes. And then you, as Visa, would not need to choose, am I going on Ethereum Classic or on Ethereum?
Right, I see.
I would still be on EOS. And that's a huge, huge functionality that EOS brings to be able to bring the enterprise solutions onto the blockchain.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. Where you're not having this complete fork, and then you have to choose which of the two you're going at, and that's not to bring in another project here, but I will mention Tezos has a similar mechanism as well. I really would love to even get into more of that process in terms of like the voting, because I understand there was recently the implementation of Rex, but that may be another discussion. I would like to talk a little bit more about what you guys are doing in this space. So other than, just, I guess, community building and kind of going out there with meetups and other, podcasts, what else are you trying to do to sort of build the EOS ecosystem?
So we've got a really strong technical team. And so we're part of the very few block producers that provide and that maintain and that create and develop core code for EOS. Okay. Which is pretty interesting to be able to push issues to Block One itself and fix their own code. Very few teams do that. We provide bare metal infrastructure, so all of our infrastructure is in our own data centers that is redundant in different internet backbones, different jurisdictions, different provinces here in Canada, different power grids, etc. And so we're redundant as a block producer. We create tools for the community. And so we've created a couple of tools and we've participated in a couple of projects, one of them being EOS Detective. I invite you all to go check it out, eosdetective.io. It effectively is a token transfer explorer right now. So you're able to see the relationships between different accounts on EOS and see how the different the token transfer and aggregated data between different token transfers is occurring on EOS. And that can be really useful if, for example, you want to participate in an ICO or you want to participate in a project and you want to see who else is participating in that. And so it gives you a vision into a visual aspect into the world of the blockchain, which is really interesting.
Is there a particular project now that's kind of taking the EOS community, by storm, let's say? What would be some top project that people can even look up on EOS Detective?
So in terms of actual project that you'd be able to look at right now?
Well, I was wondering if there is, for instance, some kind of, let's say, a token sale or...
Sure, the DApp network. So Liquid Apps is a company, and they are they've created the DSP network, and they've created the DApp network basically in the function of DSPs, DApp service providers, which is an extra layer on top of, if we count, let's say, the block producers as the first layer just above the software, the DSP layer is one layer above, where you're able to interact with the blockchain. You're able to keep that immutability and certify that everything is trusted by using Merkle roots. But the advantage of the DSP network is that it does not find itself on, let's say, the base layer. And so the resources can be, the resources are found in the DSPs. The DSPs are somewhat like ISPs, where you're able to engage the services of a DSP without necessarily needing resources on the mainnet itself, which brings about a form of inter-blockchain communication. It brings also about an infinite scaling potential for resources. So if we were talking about, let's say earlier, you're an application and you've got 100,000 users in your application, you want to provide them with free accounts. Accounts on the mainnet, they have a cost. You need to purchase RAM in order to create the table, to create your account. It's insignificant. It's very small. We're talking about pennies. But if you're an application and you want to provide free accounts for your 100,000 users, that costs $5,000, whatever it is. You're able to do that at a much reduced cost using the DSP network if you don't need those accounts to be on the mainnet itself, for example. That's just one of the examples.
Is the DSP network live already, or is
it is live? Yeah. And if you wanted to see who's contributing, so going back to EOS Detective, if you wanted to see who's contributing to that project, and if it's centralized, or if you want to see the token distribution, you'd be able to do that through EOS Detective.
Gotcha. All right, very cool. So are you then getting, because you were even mentioning in terms of contributing to the code base, do you get some grants or anything from? No.
So EOS is interesting because the incentives that are built within encourage block producers to do work for free.
Right. It seems like you're doing a lot of work for free. So
in the sense that the more you create value for the community, the more the community trusts you and then votes for you. And the more votes you get, that's how you get paid. So how do you create value? Block producers create value in many different ways, but then showcasing that value is what then puts you in position to be able to make block rewards.
Right.
And so you are incentivized to do all of these things and then to market that you're doing these things in order to get people to vote for you in return. Whether or not, the key difference though is whether or not they vote for you is completely up to them. So you could be contributing all of this and getting nothing in return. That is a possibility. And so it's an ongoing competition, and that is what fuels block producers to continuously create value, to continuously try and get votes.
Gotcha. So other than, so you were saying you're doing a lot of work on the infrastructure side, EOS Detective, sorry, did you mention some other tools as well, or do you want to get into?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So for a period of time, we did the referendum system on EOS. We were part of.
Oh, right.
There was a slew of teams that worked on the referendum system. We were one of the core teams doing this. That took roughly 6 months. We now have a system on EOS where token holders can go share their opinions or vote on polls or referendums. And although Telegram is great and Reddit is great, there's no stake behind it. We now have a method in EOS where there's a question, there's a portal, you go to the portal, there are questions, should we do X or Y or whatever it is, and token holders with the weight of their votes can showcase what their opinion or what their values or what they believe. And then that gives the signal to the block producers, maybe we should be paying attention to this, or maybe we should be doing this. So we were part of the teams doing that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know that was a really massive
it was a massive undertaking because we didn't have that anywhere else, where you have people in social media channels making a lot of noise when they might not have much stake. But then we also have the proxy service. So if you're a community leader, a thought opinion leader, a key opinion leader, and you're able to get people to stake into you as a proxy, your voice now is heavier, right? So we have a lot of proxies in there. Another project that we're working on that is very much community focused and incredibly useful for the community right now is the lost key cases. So the EOS tokens started off prior to mainnet launch, started off as an ERC20 token. During the transition of mainnet launch from porting over the ERC20 tokens to the native EOS token, some tokens were lost. And I'm not saying the tokens were lost. Sorry, I should rephrase that. Some users lost their private keys, giving them access to the equivalent amount of tokens now on the mainnet.
Right.
They still have control of their Ethereum accounts. They can still prove that they have control of that account. They can showcase as well that the EOS account with, let's say you had 1,000 ERC20 EOS tokens, and there's a new account and that's linked to it, so we can retrace those steps. That account has EOS, 1,000 EOS tokens in it, but it's never been touched. There's never been any outgoing action. We've now just created an automated solution where you can go to a portal, enter your account name that you don't have access to because you've lost your keys, you transcribed it wrong, you put it on a piece of paper and you burnt the piece of paper by accident, whatever it is. But you can prove that you still have access to your Ethereum account, and that basically that account belongs to you. So we just deployed this last week, and so that covers a significant amount of token holders that effectively thought that they'd lost access to their assets.
Was there any pushback against this? Because I guess you could, like, hypothetically come up with a scenario where somebody gave someone access to that Ethereum account. They thought, it's worthless now, I don't need it.
Which is where we come about. So there's a couple of things. Yes, so you're right that, and we've thought about this for a very long time. This project took 6 months to develop, and a portal and a platform and a way to do this, a workflow. So if there's a couple of things there. So let's say there was one scenario where we thought, I sold my Ethereum account to somebody, but for the person didn't know, and all I did is I sent them my private key, but I kept it and they never changed it. They could still technically have access. So one of the things that we did was, the automated solution is not viable, or it's not in scope if that EOS account ever got touched.
Right.
If you scammed me and you still own that account, well, you would have most likely moved those tokens.
Right.
However, there's still a year in, there's still a possibility that maybe you just didn't touch your tokens.
I mean, it's funny because I know people that have, I don't know, they contributed to some ICO. I mean, I'll mention Tezos again because I met someone last week who, had Tezos from the ICO and never touched it. He never even knew the project still exists, and
So if you still have access to the Ethereum key in that account, and you're able to do a transaction, and the person that you sold the Ethereum account to doesn't notice that you did a transaction on what he or she believes is now their account, we do give a period of 30 days where we send messages to those accounts. And so if you see that somebody is trying to overtake your account, you do get messages that show, hey, somebody's actually using your account. So those new key pairings are not given out to that person for that period of 30 days.
30 days. See, there's a little buffer there too for somebody.
And again, so
makes sense.
Still have access to the old account.
I think it's a really cool system.
The old account, like there's a lot to it. But yes, we did think about this, and this is only phased in for a period of 1 year, and so the deadline for users to go and try and claim their basically lost key accounts, what we call them, is April 20th, 2020. And so there's a certain timeline for that. There's that 30-day buffer. There's the fact that you have to sign an Ethereum transaction, even just to prove that really that belongs to you.
Gotcha.
I mean, there's multiple fail-safes for this.
Okay, I was just curious, like what sort of the reaction was. And just going back one step about referendum, is there anything kind of right now that is I guess most talked about, or is now kind of put forward on the
Sure.
referendum system? What's the top issue?
I guess there's two that are linked, and one that just got approved, and the 15 out of 21 effectively enacted. So the first one is the burning of. So let me pull back a little bit. Earlier, I said that there was 1% going to block producers, 1% of inflation going to block producers. Right now, EOS is actually allocating 5% inflation. 1% is going to block producers. 4%, which is completely unused, was going into EOS.io.saving. It was an account, and the idea was to have a worker proposal system. Since launch, so since June of last year, those tokens have not been used, and the community has not been able to come up with an adequate worker proposal system that they believe could not be gamed at this point. So EOS has been accumulating in this EOS.io.saving account. And 2 weeks ago, EOS Nation led an MSIG and a multi-signature requiring 15 out of 21 block producers to sign off on, to retire, to effectively remove out of circulation 34 million EOS tokens. So the EOS.io savings account, through that 4% inflation, is accumulating roughly 100,000 EOS per day. A little bit more than that, but roughly 100,000 EOS per day. And we just recently, 2 weeks ago, burned 34 million. We've retired them. They're no longer in circulation. They don't exist anymore. So that was one of them. That was a referendum that was quite prominent in the community. The other one that's linked to this is, instead of continuously burning these tokens, because we're not really doing anything with it at this point, the largest referendum right now is, should we simply remove that inflation? So take that 4%, switch it off, put it to zero. Right now, it is the most voted on referendum. I believe it's got a little over 26 million votes with a voter approval rating of 99.8%. So the vast majority of token holders that are voting in this referendum believe that we should just remove the 4% inflation.
Gotcha.
And so EOS Nation is working towards this. There is a pull request right now. There's an actual MSIG up, but it is not gaining traction right now within the 15 out of 21.
What is an MSIG?
So really good question. I keep throwing this term around. Like I mentioned earlier, when block producers want to enact a change on the software itself, on the code itself, it requires 15 out of 21 active block producers to sign off on that change. We call that a multi-signature, an MSIG.
Right, I gotcha.
So effectively, the block producers in EOS, the 21, are put into an account called EOS.io.prods, the producers. When you're in active position, your block producer signing key automatically gets put in prods. You now have the power to sign for transactions.
Gotcha.
You yourself cannot sign transactions on your own. You need the super majority. So anybody can put up a signature for approval. But in order for that signature to be executed, or that proposal to be executed, you need 15 out of the 21 to agree to it, to approve that. We call that the MSIG, the multi-signature.
Gotcha. Sweet. All right. Awesome. Yeah, I think that was a really good. I think we covered a lot of ground there. So
we did quite a bit. Yeah. So I think that's what's interesting with EOS as well that we didn't touch, and it is arguably my favorite feature of EOS, is the permission set. That is the permission structure powers that are native to EOS. So in a traditional blockchain, you have a key pair. You've got your public key and your private key. In EOS, it takes that one step further and really decentralizes that process even more, where you have an active key or multiple active keys, pairs, and owner keys. So if you're familiar with Linux, or if you're a developer, you're familiar with this concept of having root access and then granting access to other users. So as added security features, what I can do is I can have my owner key pair, which will have a private key and a public key, but then I can assign active accounts. And those active accounts, I can there will be an active and owner for each active key pair. I can specify certain actions that they can do. So if I'm interacting with the blockchain, let's say I'm playing a game on EOS and I'm interacting through Chrome, right? I'm interacting through through a mobile application platform or something like that, and I want to ensure that my keys remain safe. I will have my owner key pair in a safe somewhere under, you know, a key ledger or a hardware key or cold wallet of some sort. But then I want to interact with the blockchain on a daily basis. I will create an active key pair and only give access to certain features to those keys. And then if ever that key pair gets compromised, I can always take out my owner key pair and simply null this active key pair.
Right.
And so there's integrated security features like that that are not accessible anywhere else, which make it that the end user can actually interact with the blockchain without having to worry about compromising their account security.
Yeah, which
this is significantly different than other projects right now.
Right. That's amazing. Yeah, because I guess, you know, let's say with Ethereum, what people would do is they'll just create another account which maybe has a lot less money in it, but that's the only thing you can do. It's just like it has less value in it. But what are some kind of what are the granularities of kind of different permissions that you can assign for a particular account?
Really great example is the voting action. So if you were an Ethereum, perfect example what you just gave, you've got 1,000 Ethereum. And if Ethereum was delegated proof of stake and you needed to vote with those Ethereum, well, if you created 2 different accounts or 3 different accounts, it would be a pain to be able to do that. And you'd expose your key every time that you're voting with them.
Right.
And so that's an issue. But then if you want to, let's say you had 1,000 Ethereum and you wanted to keep 900 in a specific wallet, not vote for them, then you're removing yourself that voting power. So with EOS, you can have your 1,000 EOS in one account, create a key pair that can only vote. That's the only action that it can do. But it would vote with your full weight of 1,000. So that if ever that key pair were to get compromised, you simply null it, and that's very easy to do. So you gain that security while still having access to 100% of your assets. Okay,
that's a really great example that makes it really clear, right? So all you would lose is for a short time, potentially someone would be able to vote with your 1,000 coins, but like you can null it, right? Yeah.
And so for example, in Telegram, there are bots that will alert you whenever there's any action on your account. There's email systems that do this. There's block explorers that do this. So there are a variety of tools to be able to showcase when there's action with your account. So if you were to notice that there was some kind of malicious or nefarious activity going on your accounts, there are tools out there to help you monitor your own accounts instantaneously.
Awesome.
And very, very easily. And there's no cost to any of this.
All right.
Well, because the block producers produce these tools for free because they're incentivized to do so in order to gain community trust, in order to get voted in.
Gotcha. All right, Yves, yeah, this was a really illuminating discussion. I've been a fan of EOS all along, but now I will say I'm an even bigger fan after this talk. And I'm gonna point my vote towards EOS Nation. I hope some of our audience does as well. Just for the Blockmatics audience, just of course keep following us on social media. Sign up for our newsletter if you have not already. And we are doing in New York a live class in a couple weeks on Ethereum development. This is on June 6th, I believe. So you can find it also through our website. And other online courses, including there's an EOS online short course. Eva, is there anything you'd like to, how do people find you and what do people do?
So you can, I guess a couple of things. One, if you liked what you heard and you think that EOS Nation brings value to the EOS ecosystem, please vote for EOS Nation. Our block producer name is EOS Nation FTW, EOS Nation for the win. You can also vote for a proxy. So if you want to vote for multiple block producers but are unsure as to whom you should vote for, we've got a proxy. It's called the International Proxy, and the account name is Proxy for the number 4 Nation, so Proxy for Nation. Feel free to come and join us on Twitter. It's at EOS_Nation. On Telegram, it's EOS Nation, all in one word. And on Facebook, it's EOS Space Nation. We've got one of the largest active communities in EOS. We're always available to answer your questions, and looking forward to working with you and hearing what you as token holders believe that we should be working on in the future.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I'm excited. Thanks again. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, sure. Take care. Bye.
Take care.